specialty is biological control of insects. So that's good bugs that kill bad bugs. And in this case, the bad bugs are the ones that eat the crops. And Michelle?
So I'm Michelle, and I'm also a research scientist at the research center that's just in Agassiz. And my area of specialty is small fruit entomology, so berry entomology. So I study the insects that either are helpful to the berries or could be the pests of the berries. And so Paul and I work a lot together because we often study the good bugs and the bad bugs of berries together.
I'm Warren. I'm a PhD student, and these are my two supervisors. And I am from the Faculty of Land and Food Systems from UBC. And today we're going to look at some of the insects that I study for my research thesis.
So we're at the Great Blue Heron Reserve. This is like a nature reserve. This isn't a crop field. So why are entomologists, researchers that study crop pests, why are we interested in natural areas like the Great Blue Heron Reserve? A hand? No?
No.
Careful, I might ask somebody specific.
A hint? Do we have any berries around here?
Yeah.
Blackberry.
Yeah.
Good job.
I know it's from the blackberry bushes.
Yeah, there's a lot of blackberry bushes. Exactly. So actually we're going to talk a lot about the blackberry bushes today. If you drive around the Fraser Valley here, you see lots of berry fields, right? Blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries. And we also have wild berry plants. Blackberries. Who else can name another wild berry plant that we have here in the reserve? Yeah.
Poisonberry.
Salmonberry.
Yeah, poisonberry.
Poisonberries?
Yeah.
Oh, have to watch out for those.
Yeah.
So insects don't only eat crops or only eat wild plants. There's a lot of insects that eat both, and they move between them even over the course of a day or over the course of the season. And so berry farmers are often dealing with a big problem, which is that the pests they have in their field are coming from outside their field, from natural environments. But the sort of other side of that is that the beneficial insects that are present in natural environments help to keep the populations of the pests in check and reduce the numbers that are moving over into the crop fields. So the more beneficial insect action that's happening in an environment like this, the less the farmers in the adjacent fields have to spray. So as a scientist who's interested in understanding how many services these beneficial insects are giving us, we have to understand not only what's happening in the crop fields, but also what's happening here in these natural environments. So that's why Warren conducts research here, because many of the insects that live in the wild berries here are really important pests and natural enemies, beneficial insects that kill those pests that are in the adjacent agricultural production. So when we think of things that eat insects, keep their populations in check, what do we think of? So you mentioned natural enemies of aphids. What were you specifically thinking of? Ladybugs, great. So what type of natural enemy is a ladybug? Birds? Yeah, for sure.
A type of wasp that eats wasps and bees.
Yep,
That's actually an insect.
Okay, so a ladybug, what does it do to an aphid?
Kills them, I think.
How? Yeah, exactly. They eat them like you would eat a hamburger or a veggie burger. Okay, so that's one type of natural enemy.
Spiders.
Spiders, they're also predators. Yep, they have a little bit of a different hunting strategy. So those are both bugs. You mentioned birds, so it's not only bugs that kill bugs. Vertebrates that have backbones like birds can also kill bugs. But actually, if you look in the scientific literature about the type of bug that kills the most other bugs, it's not predators and it's not birds, it's actually wasps. When we think of wasps, we usually think of those horrible yellow and black yellow jackets that sting us and ruin our picnics, right? But that's actually the vast minority of wasps. There are thousands and thousands of species of tiny little wasps flying around all over the place outside that are much more diverse and much more interesting than those ones that sting us. And all they do, they don't sting people, all they do is fly around and look for other insects to lay their eggs inside. And who's seen the movie Alien?
Audience is too young.
Monster and Alien, what it has in, okay,
Now
it
you're
was
good.
inspired by these parasitic wasps.
Yes.
So the parasitic wasps, what they do is they lay their egg inside another insect. So they inject their egg inside. Their baby, which is a larva, you can think of it sort of like a caterpillar, grows inside the other insect into and then it emerges as an adult and kills the host insect. And so again, coming back to
Chomps through their body.
inside. Isn't that horrible? So those are...
And if you're Megalon, and if you swallow some larva flies, they'll start chomping through your body.
Luckily, we don't have parasitoid. These are called parasitoid wasps, and luckily humans
Sometimes
don't have
macaroni
parasitoids.
has larva flies on it.
That's true too. Those are stored product pests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've always
Okay, so
released those.
you mentioned what's your name? You mentioned aphids. Yeah, Jaren. You mentioned aphids. They have their most important natural enemy is a parasitoid wasp. It lays its egg inside an aphid. Its baby feeds inside the aphid. The aphid turns sort of hard and crusty and turns into what we called a mummy. And then instead of that aphid continuing to reproduce, a new wasp comes out that finds more aphids to lay its babies inside.
Technically, it does reproduce. Like a wasp comes out.
Well, it doesn't make its own offspring. It makes a new enemy for other aphids. And so all insects pretty much, and even each life stage of a different insect has a wasp that attacks it. So this helps explain why I said there's thousands of species of these wasps in Canada. It's easy to imagine, right? Because every beetle, every caterpillar has several species of these wasps that attack it. So it's amazing to think about all the insects you see outside. They all have their own community of different wasp species that attack them. And accordingly, the most diverse group of animals on the planet is actually not birds, it's not fish, it's not even beetles, it's now thought. It's these parasitic wasps. There's more species of these parasitic wasps than any other type of animal. So that's my love of my life is parasitic wasps. That's what I study the biology of these parasitoid wasps. And the reasons why I think all of you should go and read about parasitoid wasps is because they're very interesting. They have a huge range of lifestyles. There's ones that drill into tree bark and parasitize insects that are feeding inside trees. There's ones that climb underwater on reeds to parasitize the eggs of insects that lay their eggs underwater. There's ones that protect our berry crops. So they're interesting, they're beautiful. Some of you can come and look inside this book afterwards. It just came out this year. It's called Wasps, The Astonishing Diversity of a Misunderstood Insect, which I think is a perfect title for a book about wasps. And you can just browse the beautiful, it's like an artist painted these. And just think about the fact that there's thousands and thousands of species of these that all look totally different. And then also, even if you're like a cold-hearted capitalist, these wasps are worth billions of dollars to the Canadian economy every year because of the crop protection services they provide. And then there's a lot of insecticide sprays that don't have to go onto agricultural fields because these wasps are reducing pest numbers. So it's fairly rare that these wasps are mass-produced to release in open agriculture because there's a lot of challenges with that because they often fly away. But there are places in the world where they're cheap to mass produce, where they use drones or planes to apply trillions of parasitoid wasps, for example in cornfields in Brazil. But in the lower mainland of BC, there's actually a factory on Vancouver Island called Applied Bionomics that mass produces parasitoid wasps to release in greenhouses, vegetable greenhouses. So if you buy peppers or tomatoes from vegetable greenhouses in BC, there's actually very few insecticides sprayed on them, and it's because they're able to achieve almost all of their crop protection goals by just releasing parasitoid wasps. Actually, you go to these 80-acre pepper greenhouses, and on every row the growers will buy and hang these cards that release these little parasitic wasps that fly through the pepper canopy in these big greenhouses and protect them from insect pests. So my predecessor at the Agassiz Research Center, Dave Gillespie, that was his whole career, was establishing biological control as the basis of crop protection in these greenhouses. Okay, so we talked about, Michelle's going to talk about one case in more detail, but we talked about the wild berries, right? These blackberries that you see here, they're actually an introduced species that were irresponsibly introduced by a botanist in the 1800s. And they've become a little bit of a magnet for invasive species from other places that then come and spill over into agriculture. So we've got 3 examples here today. We've got a fly called spotted winged Drosophila that lays its eggs inside the berries, and its larvae, maggots, basically make the berries melt. So if you've eaten blackberries in the last 10 years, you've eaten a lot of these maggots, I'm sorry to tell you. Okay, and
I
then
don't like blackberries. I ate like 100 blackberries in a week.
and actually, if you're eating blackberries off the plants, it's fine. The problem is for growers, because after 3 or 4 days, the maggots just make them melt, and so they can't sell their berries or export them to other countries. This is a stink bug. It eats the berries by basically sucking it up through a straw-like mouth part. Who has stink bugs in their house in the fall?
Show me the bug.
Yeah, so these are an invasive species that I've been studying for a long time, and you've probably noticed these stink bugs have just turned up in the last 3 or 4 years, right?
And if people want here you can see a little bit of where there was some fruit, and they're on these branches here. So when we look for what the weevil was doing,
I have lots of them in my backyard. We have a bunch of trails all around in the backyard.
yeah,
We both live in
nice.
the same complex so that we get to play in the forest.
That's perfect. Well then, you know what? In your backyard you can look for this kind of damage. So what we see is with the little weevil that we all had a quick look at, the weevil earlier on in the season when you had little buds that hadn't opened yet, so they hadn't turned into flowers, that's when the weevil really likes this plant, because what the weevil does is it actually lays an egg inside of the closed bud before the flower opens up. And then it'll clip the little stalk below, so it'll chew right along here, and it'll snip it off so that that bud dies. And then the larvae of the weevil then eats and feeds inside of that bud. And when it'll develop from a larvae into what's called a pupae, and then it'll come out, chews a hole when it becomes an adult, chews a hole through that bud, and then it comes right out the bud. So what happened to the fruit? Did you get any fruit out of that?
No.
No. So the weevil really reduces the amount of fruit that you find on these bushes. I don't know if there's a weevil in this one, but this is what the damage looks like when we see it. You guys can pass it around, and then this weevil has a parasitic wasp that attacks it. Just like Paul was explaining, with the wasps attacking, and we saw that the wasp was attacking the brown marmorated stink bug eggs. This wasp actually finds the larvae inside of those buds, and it will go and lay an egg inside of the bud.
Hole in it.
And then, is there? Well, maybe somebody came out of it already.
So you know how I
We
talked
actually
about how
don't
there's
know.
thousands of species of these parasitic
We don't
wasps?
know.
There's only a few scientists in Canada and around the world who are able to identify them, because there's so many thousands of species and not enough scientists to work on them. And so we work with a taxonomist. Taxonomists are people who describe and identify insects, who tries to separate them out. They have to go to collections all around the world to see whether it matches what we're seeing. They look at tiny little characters like the pattern of hairs on the wings of these tiny insects, or how their mandibles look. And they have to figure out, is this a wasp that is from Canada, or is it a wasp that came from somewhere else? And we've been on and we have to look at their DNA, we have to look at multiple lines of evidence, and we still don't know. So it can take years just to answer a simple question like, where's this wasp from?
And so far we have not found any specimens that resemble this wasp yet. So it may be a new species, undescribed species. So that's pretty exciting. We may have found a new parasitic wasp.
As Paul and Michelle were talking about, we do a lot of different research on different pests. They're parasitoids, and for my PhD, I explore the differences and all the different types of pests. And one of the reasons I enjoy doing research is I kind of empathize with them a little bit, or personify them a little bit, because I love eating. Okay, and part of my master's thesis was exploring how they search for food, and then that kind of translates to, oh, how does a community or different types of pests and parasitoids locate their food. So what I'm exploring is, when do pests or parasitoid decide to go towards a host plant? Is it when there is just the right food stage that's available for them? Or is it because there's like a plethora or a diverse amount of different stages? Is it the flower that also helps attract them? So when you're walking, I don't know if during this summer, when you were walking down the trail there, there's a lot of flags. That was me. I flagged a lot of the different salmon berries along the trail there, because weekly I go there to check the different stages of those branches and see the different proportions of buds, flowers, fruits that are on them. And another method in which I use to collect the plants, if you step back a little bit, I'll show you how this works. Because
Dangerous piece of equipment.
yeah, this is the most dangerous thing we work with. So it pops out like this. Some people, when they walk, when they see me, they think that I'm taking photographs with it. It's kind of like a reflector. But what this really is a beating sheet, right? And in the summer, when there were more weevils that were on this Himalayan blackberry, so I would put it under, for example, if there was buds here, flowers here, I would put it underneath this branch here, and I would tap it, right? And then I see how I would collect and see how many weevils that have fallen onto the beach sheet.
Is that a weevil?
No, that's a spider there.
A spider. I found a spider.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Oh, I dropped it. No, it's not.
Is that there's such a diverse amount of host plants, and this is one of my main field sites for research, because I go out there, I collect pests and parasitoids from all stages that are all found in Great Blue Heron Reserve. I take these vials here and I collect the buds from salmon berries and also from the Himalayan blackberries to take back, dissect them, open them up to see what stages of development the weevil larvae are in. Or if more recently, if you see me hovering around the parking lot, less so here now, is that I collect the berries, the gross ones. People ask me if I'm eating them, but I collect the really gross ones.
How do you know if they're good?
Well, I wouldn't eat them, but
They're kind of rotting.
they're rotting or they're too underripe. And what I do is I collect them, I put them in this tray here, and wait for sorry, I have a million pockets here for good reason, to see if this next pest would come out of the fruits. So the Taxonomists, the strawberry blossom weevil, they lay their eggs in the buds, and then the spotted wing lays their eggs in the fruits. So it's really a lot of things out here when you're walking around the Great Blue Heron Reserve.
What do you think Warren has to use when he gets back to the
you
lab
can tell me what that
to look at what's in the
Yeah, do you know
buds?
what species?
No.
A
That's called the
microscope or
Harlequin ladybird
magnifying
beetle.
glass or something?
Yeah, exactly. He does have to use a
Harlequin,
microscope.
and it's
Yeah.
so you
And
can
any
tell-
other tools you think
See,
Warren
there's
needs?
like sort of a white.
Maybe like a tiny
It's almost like an
knife
M
to,
shape on its head.
cut open
So yeah, they
Yeah,
eat
you're
lots
right.
of aphids every
Called
day.
a scalpel.
Yeah.
And over the winter they don't.
1,000 or around 4,000 buds, and then we would dissect them all. And there's a lot of students, young students, that also help in dissecting and exploring the different developmental stages of the weevil. Yeah, but this is a pretty tough mesh here, and essentially there's different ways for people. If this was a little bit more weedy, then we can sweep it like this on the ground, and we collect insects that way too. We would swivel our net to keep it captured, right? And as you can see, that I've got some leaves, but it could be bugs. And for more thornier plants, what we can do sometimes is essentially go put the net through and then shake it. And for trees, if we have a longer extension, then we would go up there, put it through the tree branch, and then shake it and have it to try to catch the different bugs.
Has anybody ever put out a UV light at night on a white bed sheet?
No.
Okay, if you've never done that, that can be a pretty amazing experience. Insects that fly at night will be attracted to the UV light on the bed sheet, and you'll get all kinds of amazing moths and midges and nocturnal wasps.
My pillow.
Maybe use a bed sheet you're about to throw out.